Good morning, everybody. It looks like most people who RSVP'd have either logged into the webinar or are here in the room. So we want to thank you so much for joining us today, for taking some time out on your Friday. We finally have a nice weather day for this presentation, and Caitlin has her voice, so we should be in good shape. Some housekeeping stuff. If anyone needs restrooms, you go out past the elevator and then left until you literally run into them. Wi-Fi is up here on the board if you need it. For those of you on the webinar, please put a little note in that text box if you're having trouble hearing or you're having any technical difficulties, and we'll try to get it figured out. We are recording today's session so that we can post it online afterwards, so you can either share it with your colleagues or watch it again if you were just, dying to get the information over again. I think that's all in terms of housekeeping. I want to introduce our team who's here. Caitlin Bell is our Vice President of Policy and Government Affairs. Most of you know her by now. She's our counterpart who works on behalf of all of our schools in the State House all year long, but particularly this time of year when the General Assembly is in session. She, over the summer, was able to hire Luke McNamee, who's back here in the corner, who has doubled the strength of Caitlin's team, so that's fantastic. We're happy to have him. And I think that's it. Oh, well, I will let you in the room introduce yourselves and just say what school you're from, just so everybody knows who's here. Just so it's not awkward for everybody, I will let everyone know who's here on the webinar. We've got, let me see here, Janine Young from the Tinley Schools. We have Jill Barker from Anderson Preparatory Academy. We have Lindsay Roach and Emily Massengale from Crystal House. We have Molly Gregory, who is joining her colleague Sue from Geist Montessori on the phone. And we have Sarah Houselman way down south in, I'm just blanking. Sorry, Sarah. I know your school's name. It is Rock Creek Academy. I apologize for that. So hopefully we'll have a couple more folks joining us. And please feel free to, Caitlin, I assume you want folks to just jump in and ask questions as we go along. So if you all either want to type your questions in as you go to that little box in the bottom who are on the webinar, we will pause and get everything answered. And again, if you're having trouble hearing or anything else, just let me know. So thank you so much. We'll let Caitlin take it away. Oh yeah, sorry, everyone. Go ahead, Kim.
Sure. Kim Ryer with Goodwill Education Initiatives, which is 12 Excel centers currently and growing in the Indianapolis Metropolitan High School.
Paul Dennison with Dayton Charter Academy.
Deanna Kreider-Dinger,
Marshall Klinger with Indianapolis Classical Schools, which is here in Riverside, Missouri.
I'm Sarah with Paramount. I'll be the assistant principal of our second school starting this upcoming year.
I'm Alan Sutherland. I'm representing the Indiana Agriculture and Technology School.
I'm Susan Breeze. I'm from Geist Montessori Academy.
Well, we'll take it away. So I have a really, really simple, easy PowerPoint. Most of this is just going to be talking, discussion back and forth. So we'll help you guys get up to speed on what's happening at the State House. And please, any questions you have about specific bills or issues on the way, let us know. This first page, for the people in the room, you have a handout of it because it's kind of small. But this is just like an overview of the legislative process, right? We get kind of a lot of questions all the time. So some of you probably know this forwards and backwards, but if you're talking with parent groups or others, it's kind of helpful. So we just want to make sure you have this. But it's just the process how we get through. This year is a short session, so we'll be out by March 14th. But I can't get here soon enough. Every other year is a long session or a budget session, and we're out by the end of April. So I think we're cramming a lot of things in this session that maybe aren't really necessary because every legislator likes to have things they can put on a postcard in an election year that said, look what we did, even though it might not really be that impactful. So don't tell the legislators I said that, but so you can move on. Anyone have a question about any of this process-wise? All right, next slide. So I covered some of this already. We're coming up on kind of committee report deadline week and deadline week. So January 30th, and House and Senate are like a day off and other deadlines. Technically, they can move these by a day or two, but this is the target. So any bill that's not out of committee by January 30th or February 1st is not going any further. And then second reading deadline when it gets to the House or Senate floor and people have a chance to amend it. If it is not moved off the second reading calendar by February 1st or February 5th, the bill's dead. And third reading deadlines, February 5th and February 6th. If it hasn't passed out of either the House or the Senate chamber, it's dead moving forward. So this, well, I'll get there in a minute. And then we have what we call halftime, where all the bills that pass the House then go over to the Senate, all the bills that pass the Senate go over to the House, and we start the whole process all over again, but we have fewer bills to deal with. Any bill that passes one chamber, so we pass a bill in the House, the Senate says, well, forget it, we're not hearing it. Technically, that language is alive at the end of the crazy 1 week conference committee session. It can get thrown in a bill here or there. So just because a bill isn't moving in the second half, if there are any issues that you see with bills like, hey, this language passed, we don't want it to appear anywhere, make sure we know, because we try to keep an eye on all that stuff. That's kind of a quick deadline perspective. So next week will be pretty busy. There were nearly 1,000 bills filed this session. You can kind of see the breakdown there for the House and Senate. The House has, I love them for this, they have a 5-bill limit per author. So in a short session, so you can't author any more than 5 bills. The Senate has 50 members, and clearly they don't have a bill limit because they filed almost as many bills as the House, who has double the members. So there are a lot of bills out there to deal with. And like I said before, most of them really aren't that important in my perspective. Roughly 40 bills in each chamber assigned to the House Ed committees, and we'll go from there. So I think, Marcy, you've shared this link already with everyone, right?
And I will share it again.
So this link is, we've kind of created a
Did
bill
you-
tracking system, and every bill that deals with education that could impact charters in good, bad, or any way other, we've kind of included in here. Marcy's handed out kind of a hard copy of this. Anytime you click on this link, it will give you update information. So, if Monday one of these bills moves or is voted on, that information will be up here. Typically, after the halftime break, when we have a bunch of bills that are now dead bills, we have taken them off of this so you don't have to look at them. If anyone wants to see what they are, ask a question, just let us know. We can shoot out various forms of this report. But that link should always be updated. A year from now, you should be able to click on it and get this same report with all the final information on it. So my plan is to kind of just go through a handful of these bills, kind of hit some of the highlights, and then chime in with questions or that you have on any specific bills.
Before you dive into the
Yeah.
education bills, a lot of people probably are generally aware, but can you tell everybody what are the other topics in education that are receiving a ton of attention and taking up a lot of the space
Yeah,
in the discussions
there's
this
a
year?
lot of random things that are taking us up, but some things that are outside of the education spectrum, right, is the opioid issue. There are probably 20 different bills that were filed at least to somehow fix or improve or deal with the opioid addiction issue. It's a governor priority, and I think the House and Senate are both on board. What that final package looks like, I'll tell you in the middle of March, because it's all a moving target right now. The CBD oil, which I don't know if anyone cares about, I don't know if anyone in this room cares about it, but this became a big issue because the Attorney General got involved, and so it was a bill they had last year, and so that should be a fairly quick fix. Workforce, and which obviously ties into education at some course, but workforce and kind of that, what happens between high school and college, or the mix in between, how they all overlap and how we spend. A lot of it has to do with how we spend money, right? The federal money that comes in, some of the money that goes to higher ed, scholarships now. Can we better use that so that we're not spending money on giving scholarships to kids to go to a 4-year institution who don't need to go to a 4-year institution? So there's a lot of back and forth on that. We'll kind of touch on that, but those are the big ones. Luke, am I missing anything else from a big picture perspective?
Alcohol.
Oh, alcohol. Sorry, I should know this. My husband's an alcohol lobbyist, so I've tried to block it out of my head. But yeah, Sunday sales, I think is a done deal pretty much. So if you want to buy booze on Sunday, you'll be able to. But I don't think you're going to be able to buy cold beer at a gas station. So if anyone wants more details on that, I know more than I should because it's dinner table conversation. Anything else other than alcohol? Any other questions or things you guys have heard of in the news that makes no sense? Okay. From the education perspective, I mean, the big things, right? The first one that's kind of already taken care of itself is the school funding fix, right? Everyone heard the estimations were a little bit off, so there are bills moving in both the House and Senate. They're passed both chambers, actually. House Bill 1001 and then Senate Bill 189 that essentially, I mean, the state had money in its tuition reserve fund, so it's not like we had to find this money elsewhere. They'd already planned for this. They know that estimates can be off, and so it's essentially just saying we give authority for the state budget committee to take money from this tuition reserve fund.
Can you go back and explain the issue again, just to make sure that people understood what happened?
Oh yeah. So every year when we do a budget bill, right, you guys have to submit. Here's what we expect our enrollment information to be, and then LSA, the legislative service team that works with all the legislators and does the fiscal analysis, comes up with all these estimates of here's where we think students will be based on the enrollment information they gather from schools. And so we were about 6,000 students off. There are 6,000 more kids enrolled in public school than what they estimated. There's still not a lot of clarity on where all these kids came from. There are a lot of questions, but I think it's a combination of all over. These things have happened before. I think this kind of got blown up in the media when it first happened, but it really wasn't that big of an issue to legislators. I mean, it's a small, when you look at 6,000 kids and the 1.1 million students in the state, it's a pretty small percentage. And they've prepared for this, right? They have a tuition reserve fund that's been in place for a number of years, so there's money sitting in there for this very purpose. These bills just essentially give the authority for the budget agency to transfer that money. DOE is already, I'm sure you've all seen it, right, told schools we're not going to make any changes to the January payment. We've gotten assurance from the General Assembly, so they're not like fast tracking them to get them to the governor's office right away. I mean, they'll get there, but everything is moving forward as is, unless you guys have heard otherwise. Things on this seem to be pretty much taken care of, just formality of passing them all now. Another big issue, right, is the diploma testing, all the grad pathway stuff that's kind of all separate but all connected together. I know that I've had conversations with some of you more than others in this room about it, but so there are two specific bills in the House that deal with this, and they deal with it a little bit differently. There's been a lot of ongoing conversations with the Department of Education, the governor's office, House and Senate leadership, and also communication with USDOE. We have the issue with the USDOE saying the general diploma we're not going to count it in a graduation rate. So that's kind of a piece of it. Then you have the graduation pathways that the state board did, which is another piece of it. And then we decided we're going to throw high school testing in it again. So there are a lot of moving parts. So what I can tell you is House Bill 1426, which is a bill by Representative Bading, the chairman of the Education Committee, includes a number of things. It kind of clarifies that, it keeps in place the similar structure of our diplomas, but it kind of relabels them within our state code as one diploma. His hope was that the federal government would recognize this and say, instead of having multiple diplomas, that way we could count a general diploma with our federal graduation rate. The feds have been very back and forth. We haven't gotten a clear answer from them if yes, we will acknowledge this, no, we won't. Then we had like the couple-day government shutdown where we couldn't get anyone at DOE to talk to us, and so we don't have any clear direction from USDOE on will this solve the problem or not. I think from a state perspective, the way the A through F calculation is in current rule counts the general diploma right now. So from A through F and state reporting purposes, the general diploma is going to count from now on. I think the proposed rules that the state board is looking at now phases it out. So even for a couple of years within the new A through F system, it'll still count general diplomas. And obviously that's a proposed rule. It could change based on public feedback. So I think from a state perspective, we're going to have at least 3 or 4 years where the general diploma still counts. And the only thing that's really a question is, are we reporting a different number to the feds? I've yet to find anyone who can tell me that they know what the federal graduation rate is and know where to find it, that everyone kind of pays attention to the state. So if you guys have any different understanding of that or are concerned about the federal rate or anything, please let us know. That's the latest of what we heard on the diploma from a US DOE perspective. That being said, so Representative Baining's bill says, right, we have one diploma, we have all the different diploma types, so you can still get a general, a core 40, the honors and the technical honors, I believe, like different designations within there. So all that stays the same. But it does leave the core 40 as the standard, the diploma, right? So you have to opt out of the core 40 if you want a general. Senator Cruz has a bill, Senate 177. As filed, he makes the general diploma the base diploma, so you have to opt into a core 40. Conversations with all levels of leadership have agreed that everybody wants the core 40 to be the base. So that language, when they hear that, they'll hear 177 next week in education, and they will amend it to look very similar to the language in Representative Baining's bill. So they all seem to be in agreement that core 40 should be our base. You still have the ability to opt out and do a general diploma if you need to. The other things in Representative Baining's bill is it takes allows the high school test to be like an ACT or SAT, a college entrance exam, instead of the ECAs. This conversation kind of came up in the graduation pathways committee meetings and work. So that'll all go through kind of the DOE RFP process on their testing. From what we understand, it won't be like you can choose if you want ACT or SAT, but the state will put out an RFP and one of them will win. So everyone will be getting the same. We have to get the same test. So that's, again, in Representative Baining's bill. It seems to be a lot of support for that in the Senate as well. So I think that language will end up in the Senate. Yeah.
Would that take the place of the ECAs or be in addition to?
Take the place. Yeah.
The idea is that it has more value
Yeah.
after high school outside of just the ECA that ECA does. If everybody has a college entrance exam, you might get kids that didn't realize maybe they weren't planning to go to college.
So it will require that it be given during the school day. The state will pay for it, so every kid will have access to it. It's not going to be like a Saturday that you have to get kids in. And there will be like a separate, like the state will set a cut score, right, through CHE. So cut score is probably not the right way to do it, but so ACT and SAT, right, will say here's what proficiency should be, right? Instead of this is what it may take to get into pre-university, but here's what a high school proficiency would be. So that there are some people worried about that could be confusing messaging to students, but it will have to be something we work on through DOE and schools and making sure that here's what you have to get in order to pass. Not to pass, but here's what a passing score would be when you take it in high school. But you may need a better score than that to get into whatever university you're looking at. So that'll be a messaging issue. But it won't be like the ECA where you have to hit this or you just keep taking it, right? You take it once, it's part of the accountability grade, and then every student has their own plan of what pathway is best for you. So it kind of ties into the pathway conversation there. Any other questions about the testing component? The other piece that Representative Baining's bill addresses focuses just on the graduation pathways. So they put in language that says allow schools to immediately take advantage of it. So if you have students, that could graduate through one of the pathways now that maybe hasn't passed the ECA yet based on current law, but could meet one of their pathways, that they would be able to take advantage of that. So that language is in there now. And I think the goal was for this year. Now that's as it is right now. So we'll see. I'm not sure that the Senate is totally on board with that yet. This is something that IPS specifically came and asked Representative Baining that they've got some students in that. I think it would give a lot of schools flexibility. The question is, how that plays out in the A through F system, or there's just some questions around that. But the goal is to give schools funding.
They need to hit like a certain SAT score as part of their pathway. Does the state pay for it?
Well, not right now. I don't think that's going to take into effect because that will all come in next year in the budget cycle because the official graduation pathway stuff doesn't require it until the freshman class of 2023, right?
Yeah, they're talking counties of like if it's an option, does the state pay for it? So
Yes. I think that's still the plan, but as far as the immediate part for this year, you can count it. There's no funding in place already for it, so it would have to state funding. the last thing in that bill that deals with the graduation pathways is it creates a fund and essentially that would say, if you want to come up with a local plan, you can do that with a group of schools, any combination of that, and there'll be funding available to kind of create that plan and vet that plan. If you want the funding, you have to agree to have a state board evaluator kind of review the plan and make sure it's rigorous. There will still be an option this is what we're doing locally. We think it's a local pathway, and the state board can approve it. You just wouldn't have access to that grant development fund. That is totally up in the air. The bill is recommitted to Ways and Means because of that, so it'll be heard in the fiscal committee on Monday, I believe, Monday or Tuesday. That piece may come out just because of the funding tied to it in that budget year. So that's in there now. Again, the Senate's not totally on board with that, so that's a moving target. But any questions on that big messy package before we dive into some of the other bills? And then the other big overarching education topic is just the workforce and CTE stuff. From what I can tell so far, it's not going to have a huge impact this year. It's mostly just setting up, from a K-12 perspective, it's mostly just setting up a bunch of councils and study committees. I mean, we've seen some pretty significant amendments already. So House Bill 1002 and Senate Bill 50 are each chamber's version of their workforce bill. There's some other language floating out there that would say instead of, we create a 5th year of high school so that instead of, you get your diploma and graduate, and instead of going to an Ivy Tech to get a certificate, you could just do that in high school. I've heard a lot of mixed opinions about that. I think at best it's going to become a study committee, something that they look at, but nothing that'll be, that would have huge school implications. So all that's a moving target. The goal is we have a lot of dollars coming in from a workforce perspective, a lot of it federal, that are going into 10 different buckets. And if we can get a better handle of that money and better prioritize it without it being, this goes to this local entity. Right. So the whole point is to reprioritize the money to make sure that we're getting it to students that will use it in a valuable way. So with that, I'll hit a couple charter specific issues that we've heard, and then we can go through any of this list if you guys have any questions on any of them. The unused building law has come up. I think it was a House Bill 1124. It's a Representative May bill. It's not moving at all, but this brought up another issue, and I know IPS is working on some amendment language as they're working to sell Broad Ripple and want to get around the unused building language. We all know that it's messy and only 1 or 2 schools have ever access to building for $1. There are a lot of people who just want to say, well, we'll just, we'll get a exemption for our specific issue, and before long, there's no point in an unused building law. So we've been active in those conversations, trying to work through solutions that make sense. So buildings aren't holding on, or school districts aren't holding on to buildings that taxpayers are still paying for and not using, but the charters have access to it. So this all plays into the facility funding issue that we'll deal with next year in the budget year as well. So that bill's not moving, but we're definitely talking about the issue kind of behind the scenes and working with folks on potential amendments. So if you hear anything, let us know. Janet was on the phone with us last week talking about this, or earlier this week actually. So there were some really bad charter bills filed early on. So Senate Bill 315, 350, and 406 all have some pretty scary language in them. A lot of the language we've seen in previous years, right? Things that have been defeated in amendments. 315, 350, and 406. None of them are moving. We've made sure that they're not moving. But these are just, these are the things that we'll deal with on a day-to-day basis next year in a budget year when we want to talk about charter school facility funding. These are going to be all the little things we see in amendments that pop up. So it's just kind of a heads up on all the arguments we need to be ready and prepared for to deal with next year, and help legislators understand, why in some cases these don't make sense, right? So that. Any questions specifically about any of these bills that you guys have? We want to start off right away.
220.
Various education matters. Yes. The charter, I'm glad you read this up. The charter closure protocol and the virtual engagement policy stuff. Specific questions, or you just kind of want a general overview?
It appears to be moving.
Yes. So this bill has been, they keep running out of time for in committee. It's a various ed bill, so I know the chairman is working on a number of amendments and various random education things that have come to him. So on Monday, I'm sure we're going to see a bunch of amendments that go into this, and that's why he's put it off till the end. The virtual charter policy language that's in here, right? It says the provides that a student who is withdrawn from enrollment from a virtual charter school for failure to participate in courses pursuant to the charter school's engagement policy may not re-enroll in the same virtual charter school for that school year. So last year, there was some language that went passed that said that virtual charter schools are required to work with their authorizer and create student engagement policies. Essentially, we want to make sure the students that come in know what they're getting into. They work with the parents and understand what it means to be a virtual charter student, and gives them the ability to then say you're not meeting these requirements, and therefore you're not going to go to school. So this was just a technical cleanup that there was nothing that said, okay, so we say that you can't come in because you didn't meet these. Nothing keeps you from coming back the next week and re-enrolling. Because you're a charter school, you have to take anyone who comes anytime. So that's just a technical cleanup. There is some charter closure protocol language in there. The department asks for some of this. It's just clarifying that if a school does close, that many times the authorizer in the school will work with the parents and get the records directly to the school they're going to. So this just clarifies that all those records don't have to go to the DOE unless that we don't know where the kid is. So if you guys take a look at that and have any concerns with that, please let us know. Any other questions or concerns with this bill? We'll bring up, so I'm pretty sure you said Emily's on the phone. 1016, the student journalism bill. I know that we heard from some of you last year when this bill was moving that this is a concern, just because it's kind of telling schools how they have to react on this. It's moving. It's a little bit different, but it's so moving. This year, though, all the school groups did stand up and oppose it. So please take a look at this. Emily, I'm talking to Carrie specifically because I had a lot of conversations with him on this last year. But if there are specific issues with this that we can share with the bill author, we'd be happy to do that. He's incredibly passionate about this. But there are a number of bills that continue to put more and more requirements on schools, right? The cursive writing bill passed out of the Senate saying you have to teach cursive writing. There are always a handful of these bills. I think I flagged a few others here.
I had a couple questions come in online.
Oh.
And I forgot. Can you repeat the three bills one more time?
315, 350, and 406. And none of them are moving. They're all dead.
And what was the number of the bill that had the virtual charter language?
1420.
Thank you.
1399, the elementary school teacher content area licenses. So this is just a May provision. A number of schools, and you sat through all the testimony, so jump in if there's anything important to say. It's just required. There are some schools of ed who are offering content area specialists. Some schools want to hire elementary teachers with a specific content area. But right now there's no license available to do this as that. So this is just making all that available. It's not a requirement that anyone has to have them in any certain future date. It's just we want to make sure that there is a license available if they want kind of this designation.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
This is the first time I'm reading it, so I apologize. I might give
No, your
context. The Senate Bill 7 school calendar.
Yes.
If I'm reading that correctly, does it mean that this school year cannot start until the end of August?
Yes, they want to keep. I mean, yes, they don't want you to start school in the middle of summer. It's not going anywhere. Yeah. We deal with this. This bill is like the
Every
reoccurring
year,
bill. It
yeah.
comes up every year, along with, I think, the cursive writing bill. This is the 8th year it's popped up, right? They just keep coming back, and it's the same author typically, too.
It's called the State Fair Bill.
Yeah,
Actually, yeah, I think it's the same
State
author
Fair
who
bill.
did both of those.
yeah,
For the
yeah.
Like-
There are a handful of others. State Fair bill. It's also like the Holiday World
Holiday
bill.
World Bill.
The
Indiana
what?
Beach, Holiday
Yeah,
World. Indiana Beach Bill. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, for some of I was talking to the lady who works for Holiday World, and she was like, it's not just that we want kids to be able to come here in the summer, but she said all of their employees, they use a lot of employees from like all the varying school corporations, and so they lose all their employees. So, for them, it's an employment issue. But all that said, it's not going anywhere. We support local control, and we need you guys the flexibility to have your kids come in when you want them to come in. Any others that are popping out?
Yeah, can we take a look at page 1392, the other school age? So
Yes.
it's a very brief explanation. So as it is right now, kindergarten is not mandatory in Indiana. If student turns 5 before August 1st, they're eligible to enroll, but schools have the flexibility to also add a waiver so that students born that turn 5 after August 1st can still enroll.
Yep.
How does this affect that?
So this isn't going to affect anything because the bill's not moving, but essentially this is, so when we looked at the numbers, I think it's like 98% of the students who are eligible to enroll in kindergarten are actually enrolling in kindergarten. We saw a jump when the state started funding, full day funding for kindergarten, right? So this was like a lot of political attention for an issue that's really not going to get that many more kids in the classroom. I think a better way to address this is we've got the pre-K pilots that are moving, and as those continue to grow, I mean, those already require, if you receive a pre-K scholarship, you have to enroll in kindergarten. So it's a really small number of students who aren't enrolling and for various reasons, and so
Basically, it's making kindergarten mandatory, but you don't think it's going to go anywhere.
it's not going anywhere. Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, what was it, like 138 students or something based on the numbers?
We've seen various numbers. It's a really
It's a
small,
pretty low number.
really small group of kids who aren't going. Yeah. See if there are any others I have flagged here. Oh, Senate Bill 172, which is one of the governor's agenda bills. It's this computer science bill. It says that each public school, beginning July 1 of 2021, that each public school has to offer a computer science course as a one-semester elective. And beginning July 1, 2021, each public school has to include computer science in their public school science curriculum for students through K-12. I think many schools are already complying with this. It's not a mandate that everybody can take it. It's just that you offer it. 172. It also provides for funding for professional development for teachers to teach this. So this goes along with the whole coding and also reminds me of they talk about the science standards. I totally failed to mention this when we were talking about diplomas, but in 1426, it also requires the state board to look at math flexibility for the Core 40. So right now you have to have Algebra 2 to hit the Core 40.
Yeah.
It requires the state board to look at the science and math standards to figure out if there are alternative courses that could be offered instead of just Algebra 2. So not any math class you want, but math courses that are rigorous enough to still get the Core 40. But it would give some additional flexibility to those students who can't hit Algebra 2.
That would make a big difference in whether or not we even need to go there.
Right.
That one was
Yep.
big.
The issue is just the timing, right? So the state board has to do it, and it's not going to be effective right away. But yes, changing that. I mean, I think it's only I think it's 75%, 70% of the students, 30% of the students in a general diploma have an IEP and some type of severe cognitive issue. But 70% of them, what we hear anecdotally is mostly, you guys would know better than us, but it's mostly those kids who can't hit the Algebra 2 requirement. So, yeah. That were 217 is the dyslexia bill. So this bill was amended in committee. It's picked up a lot of attention and support from the caucus. And I know that it's going to require some additional work through schools, but if this is a bill that I would appreciate you all kind of taking a look at and letting us know specific concerns, problems. I'd be interested in knowing how there's clearly a debate in the dyslexia world of, is it 20% of kids are dyslexic? How do we teach them? There's definitely differing opinions. I'm not an expert to know if one is better than the other or right. There are some very vocal and passionate people on this issue. So we've worked with the author and are trying to kind of walk through it. We've connected her with some national experts in the literacy field.
Harder to hear. Can you speak up a little bit, Caitlin?
Yes.
Yeah.
So right now, the dyslexia bill has a number of requirements, and it includes charter schools. So it requires school corps and charters to screen each kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2 students. This is going to have to require some type of funding from the state, whether or not this means dibbles or, I think originally in conversations with the author, she would kind of like to lump in, like, I read, K and 1 and 2 could do all this. Right now they don't have the capacity to be a screener for dyslexia, but her son is dyslexic and they went through a year of waiting to get him tested and all these issues. So to her, this is very important. And I mean, if this really is an issue of 20% of our student population and we're not serving the needs, then we probably need to figure out how to do that. But I would love your opinion in how you do it at your school. Do you guys have teachers that are trained and aware of this? There's a section in here that requires every corporation and charter to have one teacher or one individual who's trained in as a dyslexia specialist. They've said that there is an online training that's fairly simple that's like $50. So it's not like this is going to be like a year-long requirement expensive. I don't know if that is a legitimate course or not. That's all to be worked out. So again, any input you guys have, feedback on what works, what doesn't work, how this would impact you would be really helpful moving forward. I'm sure we will see changes to this bill because there are some fiscal impacts to it.
I saw this bill just recently being floated around on social media and getting lots of kudos and praise for the idea behind it. But any time that there's a requirement of some sort of implementation, screeners aren't free, training isn't free, having a specialist isn't free. And so the big question for us is, if this is put into place, how are we supposed to pay for that? And the author's response was, well, there's grant money. Well, no grant is going to fund that for every school in Indiana. So anytime that there's something that's implemented that is going to be a cost burden on the schools, we've got to have a solid way to fund it. It's not the entire state relying on grants. So that's my
absolutely. She did bring up in committee that so Congressman Bouchon has worked really close with. He also has a child that dealt with dyslexia, so they're both very passionate about this. So he provided her a list of, here are a bunch of federal grants that the Department of Ed could be using to help with this, but they're not even using. So I think her point was there's more that the State Department can do. So, part of this may be putting pressure from, as a department, we want you to be a best practices. How do we support our schools? And if we had some literacy specialists, dyslexia specialists in there, how do we then help train our students? This is something we could do through service centers and not mandate on every school. I think there's definitely some flexibility as we continue moving down this. But there are a lot of passionate people. Anytime that you have students come in and are testifying at the microphone, I mean, it's a sensitive issue for a lot of people in the State House. So we need to be careful in how we address it. But I do think it's very helpful to know the anything specific that you guys are doing in your school or know that and have ideas on how we can address this. We would love to hear that and share those with the bill author.
I know our school is small, but we still have 200 students. Every single one of them has an IEP. And it looks like reading this that every one of those students is going to require screening for dyslexia. I might be misreading it here, but it looks like
If
If
they have an IEP, they need to go.
determines that the student is eligible to receive special education and related services. They've got an IEP, well, almost all of our students receive some level of special education services, so looks like the screening and the cost there is gonna have to
So I
be
think
part of every single one of our,
and I'll reread this, but I think the point was that those students who are, if they're screened and then show up as high risk, that they can be eligible for an IEP. Right now, there are some school corporations who refuse to put the student on an IEP. And so I don't think it's the student has an IEP, therefore they need to go through the screening, but if they show
if they're
signs, flagged as high risk, that they
okay.
have, and it's not that you have to put them on an IEP, but it has to be discussed and potentially could lead to.
Okay, that was what I was afraid of, something
But it also says and has characteristics of dyslexia too, so I don't think that it,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm not.
Yeah.
That
No,
was-
no, no,
That's
no.
what I was reading was and has or has characteristics of, yeah, so I was.
Yeah, it just
that
discusses eligibility
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
dyslexia.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thinking proactively, and this is just, I'm just wondering, is dyslexia training certification a part of higher education track for special education teachers? So like if I'm gonna go to college to be a special education teacher, am I going to already receive training and supports for students with dyslexia currently?
So I think it was like 2 years ago that a law was passed that said that any current student that's in a teacher prep program has to receive education on how you, I don't think it's specific to special ed, but essentially how you, how you would catch this, right? So if you see a student, you're trained in the signs of if the student may have dyslexia. So it's moving forward, but a lot of the schools, it's only for new teachers coming in. So she would like to see how do we train existing people, not everyone in the building, but so there's at least someone in the building that if I know a student comes in my classroom and they have dyslexia, that I can go to so-and-so in our building or corporation and just say, what do I need to know? How should I be, should I be doing anything differently? Just to have someone in the building. So, yes, there is a requirement moving forward. Now, I think that some of the universities have a difference of opinion on how, and again, this comes down to the approach of how you want to teach it. And I know this much of it, so I'm dangerous to talk about it. So. But yeah, so please take a look at this. If you on the online version of this, there are links so you can click on it and it'll take you to the whole bill, so you can read all the text. You'll see the fiscal impact statement. You can see all the changes. So there's more information on there when you click the links.
I'll resend those. I've sent them in the past, but I'll resend them again, and I'll keep resending them every couple of weeks just to make sure people don't lose them.
And any questions on them as they go through, or I don't understand how legislative language works, please let us know. We're happy to answer any questions and help walk anyone through that process. So, I will say that we've talked a lot about DREG over the years of how do we get back to, not just for charter schools, but for all schools in general. Every year we keep adding on these things cursive writing or all just things that are more and more work that you have to do that we want students to have. Senate Bill 434, it's just summer study committee, but Senator Sparks is a new senator. She took the seat, took the seat of Senator Kenley, who retired earlier this year, or last year, I guess, 2017. She, I've heard her mention it 5 different times now. She'll bring up the code book of IC20, right? She's like, these are all the regulations we have on education. She's like, how do we expect them to teach anything, right? When we have, so she's very much a proponent of getting rid of this. So she's got this study committee that essentially will bring back, for those who remember, that Senate Bill 500 from a couple years ago that was an attempt to, it was 100 pages of how do we get rid of things we've put on the books over time. So we're excited to work with this. I know it's just a study committee and nothing hardcore yet, but please, please, please let us know as you guys come up with, hey, we're doing this and we have no idea why. Just keep a list. We'd love to be able to share that. And as this moves forward, we'd love your input and anyone who's interested on that topic specifically. So while there are some silly bills in here that are trying to make your lives more difficult, give you more things to do, we're still trying to push the DREG and remind everyone, particularly in charter schools, that, you have higher accountability for more flexibility, yet every year we seem to just be lumping charters in with everybody else. So we'd like you to get that flexibility back. So
That 434
yes, you think I'd have these bill numbers down by now, but they're all kind of jumbled. But yes, 434.
Let's be 314. That's where we have a lot of conversations.
Oh, Senate Bill 314, which is student meals and lunch shaming. So the Senate bill is not moving, but there was a resolution on the House side that got a committee hearing. Luke, do you want to give a rundown of this? You kind of sat through the
Yeah, and they didn't
Conversation.
vote at it, as I recall, but essentially it was the federal guidelines that came down on how schools are supposed to provide school lunches. But I guess the issue first came to Representative Seeger's attention. She heard anecdotally from one of her parents that kids will go through the lunch line if they have a deficient lunch account. Then the cafeteria staff would take the lunch from the kid, throw it away, and hand them the alternative lunch, like a ham sandwich, peanut sandwich, or something. And it embarrasses the students, I think it's upset. And so it was calling for a study of the our department of education come up with some guidelines on how schools should handle that, so that kids aren't stuck in that situation. And how whether it be collection methods or the schools provide the lunch anyhow and take the parent. So I don't. The resolutions don't have to have a vote committee, but I think that was just to sort of highlight that. That was an issue, and then that was a Republican member on the House side, and Stoops, Democrat member on the Senate side. So it's got some bipartisan support. I'm not sure in what form it will move or will continue, but.
So from a resolution standpoint in the House, so they wanted to have an opportunity to hear the bill. I know that Chairman Baining has asked the State Department of Education for some additional information on this from their lunch books, just to get a better idea of what's happening. But essentially, this resolution says it'll urge the Legislative Council to study it over the summer. So you don't need to pass anything. It just, when they meet, like in June or July, Legislative Council meets, they'll say, here are all the various topics that people wanted to study. And so this issue could be thrown to the Education Summer Study Committee. So it'll be a summer study committee at the most. If you guys have specific info or stories that we should know about, please let us know. But I think the chairman is waiting on feedback from DOE at this point. Yes?
I've sat through some of the hearings, and if you bring examples, it can't be anecdotal, it needs to be very specific, because the legislators are jumping on, did this actually happen? Did this happen in your school? Do you know what was the name, what was the date? They're very particular about hearing stories once. It was a little embarrassing for some people. It couldn't answer.
So I think we need to kind of wrap up. So this link up here, the Action Center, there aren't a whole lot of charter-heavy bills going through right now, but we do have an easy way for you guys to communicate with legislators. So I just want to quickly run through this so you know how to use our system. Well, you can't see that. Hey, Mars.
Oh, sorry.
Do you want to help me? How do I get them to see the screen?
I thought they were supposed to see. I don't know.
So technical difficulties, I'll try to walk you through this. If you click on that link, it'll take you to IQE's Action Center, which will have, at times we have various campaigns up. It's the end of National School Choice Week, so we have a generic one up that says, contact your legislators and tell them you support school choice. If you haven't already, have your parents and students do that. It's a great reminder for legislators to hear from students that, they're actually utilizing school choice and it's helpful. Those personal stories really make a difference. But on that site, there's a link at the top that says Find Legislators. So you can go there, you can type in your address, whether it's your school address or a home address. You can find out who your state rep and your state senator are. There's a button right there that you can push to send them an email directly. And so we try to make it easy to find who your legislator is and to communicate with them. I can go talk to them. Luke and I can go talk to them till we're blue in the face and stand up and testify in committee. But it's so much more impactful when they hear directly from school leaders and also families. So if there are any specific issues, please feel free to use that. Let us know if we can help connect you with any legislator. And the last thing that I would say is, if you haven't invited your legislator to your school yet, please do so. It's amazing how many legislators have no idea what a charter school is. And some of our bigger charter supporters have probably been to many of your schools already. But there are, tons of legislators who have no charter schools in their districts. So we're also working on how do we get groups of legislators to go do tours. So if you'd ever be interested in hosting a group of legislators at your school, we will be happy to try to find a time to do that. But the more they can see and understand, who your students are and what you do, that it helps them grasp what a charter school is. So anything we can do to help with that, we'd be happy to. I know we have to wrap up and there's food here, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to attempt to answer them.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize for the technology issue that I couldn't share that. I thought it looks on this little box here like I'm sharing my screen, but it's not. We can send out more information specifically, like a how-to guide maybe on how to use the Action Center. And please feel free that, that ability to ask questions about bills doesn't end when the session ends. So please send me any questions that you have at any point throughout session or throughout the year. That's why our organization works so well, is because I can filter questions up to Caitlin to talk to legislators. At the same time, things that are going on in the legislature, she filters through me to send out to you. So if there's nothing else burning at this moment, please grab some food if you have time to stay for a few minutes. If not, thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you all again.